This is BBC News, where Donald Trump is all heat. Joe Biden plays it cool.
The president-elect says he is getting on with the job, whether Republicans accept it or not.
America, he says, is back, even as he admits this transition is anything but normal.
Have you tried to reach out at all to the president? And if he is watching right now, what would you say to him?
Mr. President, look forward to speaking with you.
But the top Republicans in the Senate still won't say publicly that Mr. Trump was even defeated.
Also in the programme, if the Pfizer vaccine proves to be effective, how do you administer it to hundreds of millions of people? We'll look at some of the challenges ahead. Plus, the message from Boris Johnson congratulating Joe Biden on his election victory that contain more than just well wishes for the president-elect.
Hello, I'm Catty Kane, Washington. Christian Fraser is in London. Joe Biden is pushing back against Republican efforts to undermine his victory. As the president tweets his outrage in all caps, Mr. Biden is deliberately calm, telling reporters in the past hour that he's getting on with the job of building the next administration.
He admitted that the spectacle does America no favours, but he appeared relaxed by the prospect of Mr. Trump or any of his GOP colleagues refusing to engage with the handover process.
We are already beginning the transition. We're well underway. And the ability for the administration in any way by failure to recognize our win does not change the dynamic at all in what we're able to do.
Sir, what do you say to the Americans that are anxious over the fact that President Trump has yet to concede and what that might mean for the country?
Well, I just think it's an embarrassment.
Let me just remind you that what you are watching in America right now is not normal. What usually happens is that the loser concedes, and within days of the outcome, the outgoing president welcomes the incomer to the White House. In 2008, George and Barbara Bush invited then President-elect Barack Obama and Michelle to tour the West Wing.
And 4 years ago today, just 2 days after the election, Mr. Obama welcomed Donald Trump to the White House. And the incoming Vice President, Mike Pence, went to meet the outgoing Vice President, one Joe Biden. So, no, this is not usual transition. And some Democrats are alarmed. Our senior North America reporter, Anthony Zerka, is out on Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington 4. It's good to see you, Anthony. The impression I got from Democrats we spoke to at the weekend was, look, we need to give the White House some time with this. They'll come around. But the more it goes on, the more intransigent the president is, the more problematic it becomes. Are there some around Joe Biden who think he needs to be more assertive?
I think there definitely is starting to be more concern about this process playing out, that allowing Donald Trump to tweet and to rail against the election, ignoring him and pretending he will go away was kind of how Democrats ended up with Donald Trump in the very beginning. So they do, Joe Biden in his press conference said that they didn't need the money for a transition, didn't necessarily need the briefings for the transition. Joe Biden's been there before. He knows what's in the presidential daily briefings. He's not making decisions on foreign policy yet. But the reality is that this is part of the process. And as mentioned, 4 years ago to the day that Barack Obama welcomed Donald Trump, 12 years ago to the day that George W. Bush welcomed Barack Obama here. So this is now starting to be a fairly significant break with tradition.
I mean, it's worth reminding our viewers, Anthony, that what the president and his supporters are trying to claim is that there was such wide-scale fraud that they will be able to roll back tens of thousands of votes, not just in one state, because Pennsylvania wouldn't be enough, but in 2 states, 3 states, or a combination of 4 states. Is there anybody really in senior Republican leadership that truly believes that?
I don't think so, at least not, not privately. On the record, they may be holding their fire as the way they do with any kind of a Donald Trump-created controversy over the past 4 years, where they just keep their heads down, let Donald Trump do his thing and hope it'll blow over. That same strategy has worked in the past, and I think they're figuring it will work again now. But you're right. If you look at the numbers just don't add up. for Donald Trump. But the Republicans, I think they as much don't want to anger Donald Trump, who's going to be president for another 2.5 months, but they also don't want to anger Donald Trump's base, who Donald Trump speaks to, because while Donald Trump may be off the scene in a couple of months, that base isn't going anywhere, and they're the kind of people who vote in primary elections. So if you're a Republican office holder making that calculation and you think about running in a primary somewhere down the road, what you don't want is to have Donald Trump's base angry at you and willing to support a challenger that could knock you out of your seat, even if you have an easy path in a general election against a Democrat.
Anthony, how long does this go on, do you think?
That's a very good question. Obviously, we have deadlines set in the Constitution, set in the laws when you would have to report in each state capital. The electors pick the electoral slate. They would cast their ballots in all these state capitals. That begins in the beginning of December. So there's going to have to start being progress made at some point. There are rules about recounts. There are rules about legal challenges. So I think we will see some clarity in the coming weeks, and we're going to have to see something by the beginning of December.
This could go on. This election that never ends could go on until the beginning of December. Anthony Zurcher, thank you very much. We will get a break at some point, but not before Saturday, because that is when a march for Trump is planned here in Washington, D.C. We heard this from Ron Christie yesterday, right, that the Trump campaign is sending out alerts to its supporters, emails saying, please give us money for these legal challenges. So they are trying to mount this big effort, and let's see what happens on Saturday. I mean, it's interesting just coming through town today, Christian. I was kind of walking around my neighborhood this morning thinking, I wonder why they're not taking down the boarding yet. Remember all those shops that are boarded up here in Washington because they were worried about violence? There hasn't been any violence in the country, let's say. It's been very calm, but I wonder whether they're a bit concerned about that march.
But presumably, if there's going to be a march for Trump rally, there's going to be a march for Biden rally.
There will be a march against Mr. Trump. Up to. Well, this all depends, of course, on the legal outcomes to some extent. A top DOJ prosecutor has quit now in protest over a memo from Attorney General William Barr that says that prosecutors would be investigating allegations of voter fraud before the contested states certify their results. In
a densely worded note, Mr. Barr said, it's imperative that the American people can trust that our elections were conducted in such a way that the outcomes accurately reflect the will of the voters. Inquiries and reviews may be conducted if there are clear and apparently credible allegations of irregularities that, if true, could potentially impact the outcome of a federal election in an individual state. So what does this all mean? We're joined now by Scott Anderson. He's a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution and a senior editor of Lawfare. Scott, I was speaking to Democrats just after this news broke last night, and they were concerned. What is it that they're alarmed about?
I think the real concern at this point is that these legal actions are not really part of a legal strategy. There's not a very clear route forward in terms of actually flipping enough votes to change the results of the election. But they are contributing to a narrative that one could see some of President Trump's supporters relying upon to try and justify steps that might move away from the election results, such as having state legislatures appoint electors instead of relying upon the election results, or potentially adjusting the counting of electoral votes in the Senate or in the Congress by the Republican-held Senate.
And specifically, the concern about Bill Barr issuing this statement is what? Just that it ups the ante?
I think that's basically right. That statement, in my mind, is in alignment with a lot of things we've seen Attorney General Barr do to help the president, which is open investigations on limited evidence. But very few of them have actually led to very much. In particular, they rely upon the rank and file of the Justice Department. And Attorney General Barr has not really shown that much ability to get too many of them to go along with it, particularly in the case like this, where you would need multiple investigations of a substantial scale to really undermine the results of the election. Instead, I think it's primarily a political signal, another one of these messages contributing to this broader narrative that there were problems with these elections, and therefore it might be okay for people to disregard them and establish some other route to securing whoever the next president may be.
So, Scott, when Bill Barr instructs prosecutors to move forward with investigating significant crimes, is there something he's seen that the rest of us haven't seen?
If he has seen it, they haven't shared it with the public, and they haven't shared it with the courts in which they've been pursuing these legal claims. So far, we've seen very little evidence of any any sort of electoral fraud whatsoever, and certainly nothing at the sort of scale that would seriously bring into question or undermine the election results as we understand them to be at present.
So can you put a number or figure on how many court cases we've had so far, where those court cases have gone?
Since the election day, I would guess we've had just shy of about a dozen, maybe over a dozen at this point. Most of them have really run aground. Either they've been dismissed and they may be subject to appeal. Most of them were in state courts. In the federal court action, we saw one recently filed in Pennsylvania, alleging a much broader claim, essentially saying that absentee voting is unconstitutional because it applies different standards to evaluating security than in-person voting. And on that basis, the Trump campaign has sought to stop the certification of election results in Pennsylvania. It's not clear what remedy you could apply to that other than maybe throwing out one group of ballots or the other, which seems like an extreme remedy no court is likely to buy into. But again, it is all an effort to slow down the process and throw it into confusion, which in hopes that might open opportunities moving forward. But I think it's very unlikely at this point that any of this is going to lead to a changing of the actual election results.
And Scott, at what point does the clock run out on these legal challenges?
Well, there's a deadline of December 8th by which most states will have to resolve their internal legal procedures, meaning under state law, for determining who their electors are to qualify for certain requirements under the federal system. That's the deadline we saw at issue in Bush v. Gore that ultimately led to the culmination of that case and led the Supreme Court to kind of intervene and resolve the accounting in that case. But in theory, it could go on longer if there is a dispute. Really, election disputes don't get firmly resolved until Congress counts the electoral votes, which happens usually on or about January 6th. Meaning if the actors involved are truly intent on dragging this process out and throwing every ounce of doubt possible on it, we may be in for several more weeks of this sort of debate.
And Scott, just a very quick one. There is talk that there may be a legal challenge from the Biden team to get the funds they need for this transition released. How quickly would that happen? Where would it happen?
I'm not entirely sure. It's most likely to happen probably in the District of Columbia federal court. It would be a tall order at this point. Really, the statute in question does seem to give a fair amount of discretion to the General Services Administration official to determine who the president-elect is, although it's very clear that is intending to do so on the basis of the election day results, not something later in the process, such as the casting of electors' votes, which some people have indicated would be a better line or a line that the GSA may apply. Regardless, the longer this goes on, the stronger their case will be. But at this point, just a few days later, that might be a little bit of a tall order. I suspect we're going to see ongoing negotiations, and any legal action, if it takes place, will take place at a later date.
OK, Scott Anderson, thank you very much. The key dates there, December the 8th, and then the final meeting of the electors where they announce that result is on January the 6th. I'm going to go tomorrow, Christian, and see my parents for a couple of weeks. I have this sinking feeling that I'm going to come back at the end of November.
You are coming back before January the 6th.
I am coming back. I'm coming back in a couple of weeks' time, but I think I might still be in this position. I think we could still be here. We could all be saying the same thing. The election that never ends. It's like one of those bad films.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we will be here. Groundhog Day. Let's get some of the day's other news. One of the most prominent Palestinian officials, Saeb Erekat, has died at the age of 65 after contracting COVID-19. Mr. Erekat was the chief negotiator for the Palestinians in peace talks with Israel for 2.5 decades. He was also Secretary General of the Palestine Liberation Organization and a key member of its most powerful faction, Fatah.
A Vatican report has found that top church officials and 2 popes turned a blind eye to allegations of serial sexual abuse by a now disgraced cardinal in the US. Theodore McCarrick was stripped of the priesthood last year and forced to resign as a cardinal. The investigation looked at how he was able to rise through the ranks despite allegations that went back decades.
Italy has recorded its worst daily figure for COVID-related deaths since mid-April. 580 more people have died. Italy was the first country in Europe to be badly hit by the pandemic and has seen cases rise steeply over the last month. It's trying to avoid a total lockdown, operating a tiered system of regional restrictions instead.
It is tough all over Europe. For those of you watching on BBC World News, we're going to be right back. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has asked GPs and other NHS staff to be ready from the start of next month to offer the new COVID vaccine in a 7-days-a-week operation if regulators judge it to be safe and effective. But he warned there would be many hurdles still to overcome.
We do not have a vaccine yet, but we are one step closer. There are many steps still to take. The full safety data is not yet available, and our strong and independent regulator, the MHRA, will not approve a vaccine until it is clinically safe. And until it's rolled out, we won't know how long the effect lasts for, or its impact not just on keeping people safe, but also on reducing transmission. As Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jonathan Van Tam said yesterday, it's like the first goal scored in a penalty shootout. You haven't won the cup yet, but it tells you that the goalkeeper can be beaten.
Good analogy. The Health Secretary there talking about being one step closer to a new coronavirus vaccine.
In politics, timing is everything, and news that Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine, which is still under development, is shaping up to be 90% effective, came too late for voters in the US elections, something which hasn't escaped the notice of Donald Trump, if you look at his Twitter feed.
Cases of coronavirus have been surging across the United States. 100,000 new diagnoses are being made every day, bringing the total to well over 10 million. 59,000 people are now in hospital. That's the highest ever figure in the United States. Nearly 240,000 people have now died. Against this grim backdrop, an effective vaccine could make a huge difference. But to achieve mass immunity, a vaccine needs to be delivered to as many people as possible. Tulip Mazumder's been looking at how that might happen.
As the scientists offer a glimmer of hope, the gravediggers continue their grim task. All around the world, loved ones are laid to rest. So, with the news this week of a potentially very effective vaccine, countries are racing to prepare for a possible rollout.
This is an absolutely unprecedented situation we find ourselves in today, with over 200 vaccine candidates, 40 of them in clinical development within 10 months of a new virus being discovered.
But actually getting any successful products into communities is an epic logistical task. Keeping vaccines cold or even deep frozen on a colossal scale will be one of the key challenges. Health workers will also have to locate vulnerable elderly people in very remote areas. Because, as the World Health Organization has repeatedly said, doing this protects all of us.
No one is safe until everyone is safe.
We know that demand for a successful vaccine will far outstrip supply in the initial months. So 3 of the big global health and vaccine organisations have come up with a new system called COVAX. It aims to ensure everyone anywhere in the world who needs the vaccine most gets access to it first. It wants to procure 2 billion doses to protect at least 1 billion people in the next year. First health workers, and then the over 65s will be prioritised.
So what you really want is a situation where you can begin to roll those vaccines out to begin to dampen down the epidemic. But if you have a region that has a raging epidemic, you may want to put more priority in that region to be able to bring it down than another place that already has pretty good control.
Most rich countries are still making side deals directly with pharmaceuticals, though. The UK, for example, has signed up for more than 300 million doses of 6 different vaccines. The US hopes to get 300 million doses of various vaccines by January. But remember, all of this is a bit of a gamble. The World Health Organization says any vaccine for COVID-19 must be at least 50% effective. And we are going to need more than one. We simply don't know yet how much protection these other vaccines could give or how long any protection will last. The wait for life to return to some semblance of normality continues, but we are edging ever closer to that goal. Tulip Mazumder, BBC News.
So if that Pfizer vaccine does prove effective, as we think it will be, the next hurdle will be administering it to hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, and doses of this particular vaccine pose a unique challenge. They need to be kept at seriously cold temperatures. For long-term storage, the vaccine needs to be at minus 70 degrees Celsius. That's around minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is beyond the capacity of many specialist hospitals, including the Mayo Clinic. The vaccine lasts up to 48 hours out of the deep freeze, but can only be taken out 4 times in total. And each patient will need 2 doses, 21 days apart, to build up their immunity.
It's going to be a mammoth challenge getting that vaccine into people's arms quickly. So let's speak to Jim Blumenstock in New Jersey. He's responsible for the United States Pandemic Response and Recovery at the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials. Jim, it's great to have you with us on the programme. I saw you doing a television interview 3 or 4 weeks ago, and you were making an urgent appeal for money. And you said that you think you require around $8.4 billion for health officials to distribute this vaccine. How much has Congress allocated of that money?
Up to this point, our members, the state and territorial health officials, have received around $200 million that was principally for pre-event planning and readiness. Clearly, it is not close to being sufficient to really fund a robust response that will last months. In order to get vaccine to all the people that need it as quickly as possible, the public health infrastructure is all about scale, speed, and scope. This is going to be an extremely labor-intensive effort. As your piece before mine highlighted, it is not without significant challenges, some of which are logistics, other are technical, and quite frankly, there are issues around manpower availability and public opinion, all of which require an organized and well-invested campaign to ensure that at the end of the day, upwards of 300 million Americans have the opportunity to receive safe and effective vaccine in the most efficient and equitable means possible.
So while the Commander-in-Chief is texting about his legal problems and he's challenging this election result, what the Commander-in-Chief might do is start the heavy lifting in getting this money out there. But we'll park that for 1 second. I mean, this Pfizer vaccine would need to be stored at minus 80 degrees. How many states and local health authorities have the sort of cold storage facilities that they will need?
Well, deep freezers of that magnitude really are not plentiful. Vaccine typically is not stored at that ultra cold temperature. They're mostly refrigerated or normal freezers. So there are few units across the United States that have that capability. So that is somewhat of a challenge or a complication. But it's not a game ender. So we're developing workarounds. Some hospitals are actually going out and buying new units to install that can provide on-site storage. But the major effort here, or the tactical approach, is using thermal shippers. I best describe these as high-tech coolers. Boxes, if you will, that have all of the insulation, the ability to maintain the integrity of the payload, which the vaccine, the use of pelletized dry ice. They have data loggers that have temperature recorders and GPS. So these are very high-tech mobile units that can safely and effectively get the product from the manufacturer all the way to that neighborhood in that community where the vaccine will eventually be administered. And there's
realistically, Mr. Blumenstock, realistically, how long do you think it's going to take for every American who needs one to get as many doses as they need of this vaccine?
So, well, I'm really not in a position to give you a hard and fast estimate. But I think with the promising information that we heard yesterday, I think it is quite possible that the very first doses of a safe and effective vaccine could be administered in a matter of, in a period that's measured in weeks, not months. But certainly in calendar year 2021 is when more vaccine becomes available, is when we build out the infrastructure sufficient to provide this level of service. I would say between the second and third quarter of 2021, you'll see huge penetration of vaccine availability throughout the country with many facilities, not only hospitals, but pharmacies, doctors' offices, public health clinics. The public health system will be standing up many traditional public health clinics that they do every year for seasonal flu or outbreaks like for measles or hepatitis. So that is really a full court press that will really require the public health and the healthcare system to give its all to really achieve this national mission.
Jim Blumenstock, thank you very much. We are waiting until early next summer, it sounds like. When a new leader takes office, it is par for the course that other world leaders offer their congratulations. Nowadays, Twitter is the medium of choice to convey that message. So is business as usual for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. When US networks called the election for Joe Biden, a tweet was duly sent. Yeah, the message congratulates the president-elect on his election and Harris on her historic achievement. But if you look closer, as first spotted by the Guido Fawkes blog, you can make out the words Trump on. And in the paragraph below, you see second term and on the future of this. The UK government has since explained that 2 statements were prepared in advance for the outcome of the election and that a technical error meant that parts of the alternative message were embedded in the background. Why not just write a new one? Seriously? I mean, how hard is it? It doesn't even take very long to write a tweet, does it? It's pretty quick. Yeah. Shall we show you Biden and Boris Johnson talking today? I think we've got a picture of that. Here's Boris Johnson on the phone to Joe Biden. So it did happen. Well, yeah, let's hope they got the calls right at least.
Hello there. Much of the country today was dry again like we saw yesterday, but we saw more sunshine around today. And again, it was pretty mild with fewer showers around. Tomorrow, though, quite different story for the north and the west of the country, windy and wet. But elsewhere, we should continue to hold on to the drier weather. Now, this wet and windy weather will be pushing into Northern Ireland, much of northern and western Scotland through tonight. Some pretty heavy and persistent rain in places, but elsewhere, mainly dry, variable cloud, a few clear spells, lighter winds here, so we could see issues with mist and fog developing again. And here it will be quite cool, 6 to 8 degrees, milder further west where you have that wind and rain. And the reason for the wind and the rain is this new area of low pressure, which will be very slowly moving its way eastwards because it's bumping against this area of high pressure. But there'll be more isobars on the charts through tomorrow, so a windier day for all. Well, certainly windy for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland with some heavy and persistent rain here. The rain very slowly pushing in towards western England and Wales by the end of the day. But elsewhere, much of eastern Scotland, certainly England and Wales, will tend to stay dry, albeit rather windy. You could see a little bit of brightness around. 12 to 14 degrees here, a little bit cooler than what we've had through today, and around low teens further north and west. That band of rain, some of it heavy, spreads its way eastwards right across eastern Scotland, England and Wales through Wednesday night, takes the strong winds with it too, and leaves in its wake something a bit cool and fresher, but a little bit drier, just a few showers across western areas. So here's the pressure charts we head on into Thursday. We're in between weather systems. A ridge of high pressure will bring a fine day for Thursday before this next area of low pressure will bring more unsettled weather to end the week. So any early rain will clear away from the east, and then it's dry and bright. In fact, Thursday, not looking too bad at all. We should see quite a bit of sunshine across the country, particularly central and eastern areas. Further west, 1 or 2 showers around, and it starts to turn windy and cloudier in the northwest ahead of this new weather system. A slightly fresher day, though, I think, for all areas. Temperatures of 9 to 13 degrees. Then the next weather system starts to hurtle in for Thursday night into Friday. Should clear through, but it'll end up being a rather breezy day through Friday with sunshine and showers. Some of these will be heavy across western areas, and then it turns unsettled, wet and windy conditions as we head on into Saturday, but it will be on the mild side both days.
What makes World Service so unique is its genuine world perspective, not just in news, but actual cultural landscape.
Well, I grew up with the World Service as the soundtrack to my life. You were never really cut off so long as you had the BBC.
That's where we'll heard the real news, a window to what's going on in the outside world.
I can be out in the garden raking leaves, doing kind of mindless labour, and yet feel as if I'm being put in touch with the world, the whole world.
Bringing the world closer, the BBC World Service.
Delivering papers used to mean waking up real early. But now I go after tea, and my bag is way heavier. Oh, that's better. Oh, it plays havoc with me tyres. Rain or shine, we make sure you get the next day's headlines before anyone else.
BBC News delivers you tomorrow's front pages tonight. The papers, weeknights at 10:30 and 11:30 on the BBC News channel.
2020, the year that staying in became the new going out. But luckily for you, this year's Children in Need lineup will make you feel like you've gone out without even leaving your sofa. Who's in then? BBC Children in Need, Friday night from 7, live on BBC One and BBC iPlayer. I'm going to need a stronger cuppa.
Never miss a story. Get the headlines as they happen. And watch BBC News live wherever you are. Download the BBC News app.
You're watching BBC News. I'm Katty Kay in Washington. Christian Fraser is in London.
Our top stories. Joe Biden weighs in on healthcare, saying he'll make it a top priority. Comes as the Supreme Court hears arguments for unpicking a key component of President Obama's Affordable Care Act. There's been many warm words of congratulations from around the world for Joe Biden, but a stony silence from many members of the Republican Party. We'll be asking a strategist from the GOP whether they plan to continue disputing the election.
And also coming up in the programme, during Trump's presidency, cable news channels saw audiences soar as we all gorged on a diet of rolling news. But what will the Biden era mean both for ratings and editorial agendas? And any new coronavirus vaccine will depend on the help, guess what, of an ancient marine creature. Horseshoe crabs play a vital role, but we better move fast. They face extinction. Donald Trump prides himself on fulfilling the promises he made to the electorate in 2016, but there is one glaring omission in his record, and that's his failure to repeal and replace Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, to give it its proper name. He never did come up with any healthcare proposal to supplant it.
But today the Republicans were hoping they might just be able to persuade the Supreme Court to help them finish the job. The court's been hearing arguments over a key provision, the individual mandate, which required all legal residents of the United States to have health insurance. Republicans say that provision was unconstitutional. We're not expecting a final verdict until June.
Well, in the past few hours, President-elect Joe Biden has been laying out his response, saying that Obamacare commands widespread support and he'll make healthcare a top priority in his new administration.
This effort to bypass the will of the American people, the verdict of the courts in the past, the judgments of Congress, in my view, is simply cruel and needlessly divisive. Regardless of the outcome of this case, I promise you this: beginning on January 20th, the Vice President-elect Harris and I, we're going to do everything in our power to ease the burden of health care on you and your families. I promise you that.
Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Nomia Iqbal, who's in Wilmington, where Joe Biden has his headquarters and where he was speaking. Nomia, Joe Biden's going to have a huge inbox of things that he has to deal with. His priority has to be the coronavirus and the state of the American economy. Is he really going to be able to take on a healthcare fight as well?
I think he's definitely up for it. Just in the press conference that he gave, he used really emotive language to explain why he believed that the Health Care Act should be expanded to millions of Americans. He used phrases like family first, and he talked about how his own family had used healthcare. And we just heard in that clip, he said to take it away from Americans at this time during a global pandemic would be cruel. You know, the Democrats have always been very passionate about Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, and you know, they say to get rid of it anyway would be cruel, but to get rid of it during a global pandemic, which has affected so many Americans, would be morally reprehensible. And you know, if it was removed, there would be chaos across the healthcare system. They say it would weaken public health and also impact the recovery of the economy, which is also another one of his key priorities.
Joe Biden has said, Nomia, that he wants to expand Obamacare, but he can only do that, of course, if he has a majority in the Senate, which again reinforces why those two runoff races in Georgia become so important.
Definitely, and he was actually asked in the press conference about if he would, you know, the fact that the Republicans, no high-profile Republicans, have actually acknowledged the fact that he's even won the election and is the president-elect. And when asked if he would be able to, was confident that they would be able to work with him, he said they will. At the moment, as you say, the Senate races are still going on. If they get even a slim majority, it will help him. Even if they get 50, then it would be a tiebreak, and obviously Kamala Harris would make the final decision. But in this conference, he was very self-assured, very confident. Remember, he's been on the political stage for more than half a century. He knows how to work with the opposition, and he seems pretty confident that he'll be able to do that.
OK, Nomia in Wilmington, thank you very much. You do wonder whether those two runoff races and the politics behind that has something to do with where Republicans are at the moment. Let's find out, because at this moment, only 4 Republican senators have congratulated or even acknowledged Joe Biden as president-elect. As a reminder, Election Day was a week ago.
Yeah, and today, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo didn't just stay silent. The man whose job it is to spread American values around the world, values like democracy, said exactly what his boss wants to hear.
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready.
There is no evidence of any of the assertions made by the president or Secretary of State Pompeo. Secretary of State Pompeo.
It's the chuckle, isn't it, that does it. Mr. Trump did, of course, win the second highest number of votes in an election here ever, behind Joe Biden. So maybe people like Mr. Pompeo and Mr. McConnell are just looking out for their own futures. Maybe Republicans can't afford to irritate the president. Ron Bonjean is a Republican strategist. He joins us now. Ron, you and I have been speaking over the last few days. And when do you think, at what point do you think, as your view on this shifted over the course of the weekend, Republicans do say to the president, OK, it is time for us as a party to come out publicly and say that Joe Biden is the president-elect?
I think that'll happen eventually, but I'm seeing the strategy unfold as a focus on Georgia, to focus the energy and the intensity and the frustration of the way the vote turned out for the president and focus conservatives and voters on Georgia for January 5th. That doesn't mean that the elected Republicans are going to stay in the same place they are, but I think that it is going to last for a couple of weeks like I thought. Again, the Supreme Court decided that during Bush versus Gore, it was December 12th when they decided to go for President Bush. So there is some time. Yeah. This is a great grace period.
And look, Mitch McConnell wants to make sure that Republicans hold on to the Senate. He wants to keep his job. He wants to carry on being Senate Majority Leader, which is why he needs to win those 2 runoff races, those Senate races down in Georgia. Is there any downside to the Republican leadership for not coming out and doing what is traditional and conceding that Joe Biden has won?
Not at this point. If this plays out for the next few weeks, and Republicans will eventually acknowledge publicly that Joe Biden is the president, I think that'll be just fine. It would be more of a problem if it's inauguration time and we have not recognized that Biden is going to be president. At this point, we're in the lame duck, where we are focused on getting organized for Georgia, letting these states certify their counts and engage in recounts. There really is, in terms of a focus, there really needs to be a focus on Georgia in terms of preserving the majority.
Yeah, I mean, just to mark people's calendar, Ron, Mitch McConnell has given him a long ramp today, hasn't he? Because he's clearly himself focused, as you say, on the Senate races in Georgia. But he's talked today about the College of Electors coming back. And up until that point, the legal battles can continue. And that isn't until the first week of January. So people should get ready, shouldn't they? This is going to go on for 5-6 weeks.
It could go on for 5 or 6 weeks, but that doesn't mean that, Joe Biden... I mean, he can put together his transition team. He can start putting together his plans and get ready to implement those January 20th when he's president. Both can happen at the same time. I don't think many people necessarily care whether or not Republicans recognize Joe Biden right now. I think they would care very much if in January, once he's inaugurated, they weren't recognizing him as president. I think that would be a huge problem for us as a party. Our focus is on Georgia and preserving the majority, and making sure that voters understand that we're letting the situation play out in terms of recounts and any sort of legal room that the president needs to make his case. Most Republicans believe that Biden will be president, but they're letting the president have his day in court.
Okay, Ron, lovely to talk to you. Thank you for your perspective this evening. I mean, I just come back to this point, and I made it to Ron the other day, that if this was happening in Belarus or some far-flung banana republic and the president was refusing to accept an election and was trying to allege there was some deep state conspiracy and he was putting his top legal guy on it to try and unpick the result, we'd be ringing the alarm bells, wouldn't we? America would be ringing the alarm bells.
Yeah, I mean, not just us, but guess who'd be ringing the alarm bells? One Mike Pompeo specifically would be ringing the alarm bells. And in fact, in the course of the last week, Christian, he has rung the alarm bells about other people's electoral processes twice. Yesterday, this statement sent out expressing concern. We are concerned by the large number of unelected seats constitutionally reserved, the disqualification of candidates. Here you go, another one just 2 days before the election, a day before, widespread irregularities observed during the Tanzanian elections. America, which prides itself on being the arbiter of what is democratic in other countries, at the moment, you can understand why there are people around the world looking at America and saying, hold on a second, guys, don't comment on our democratic processes because yours looks like, at best, a bit of a shambles at the moment.
So damaging, isn't it? And some are fueling it.
Pots and kettles.
Some are fueling it.
Cable news outlets, and I include the BBC in that, have enjoyed a ratings bonanza during the Trump years. There were days when we were buried under an avalanche of competing stories, most of them coming out of the White House. And for many, rolling news became a daily diet.
But with the stagehand set to close the curtain on the Trump administration, the media is working out how to navigate the post-Trump era. And for Fox News, there appears to be some friction between the on-air talent determined to embark on a new path and those who we know as the acolytes of the Trump brand.
Yeah, look at what happened when Fox News broke away from the White House. Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany yesterday, and how the station's flagship star Tucker Carlson reacted later on his show.
We want every legal vote to be counted, and we want every illegal vote to be...
I just think we have to be very clear. She's charging the other side is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting. Unless she has more details to back that up, I can't in good countenance continue showing you this.
In a democracy, you cannot ignore honest questions from citizens. You're not allowed. You can't dismiss them out of hand as crazy or immoral for asking. You can't just cut away from coverage you don't like. You can't simply tell people to accept an outcome, because force doesn't work in a democracy. That's dictatorship.
You wonder what's going on at Fox News. By the way, it's not just Fox News having to navigate a future, however, without the Trump administration. The three major cable news networks have bucked the trend and seen ratings rise, while the rest of television has seen viewers turn off and turn to Netflix and iPlayer.
So where do the news channels go from here? Let's speak to Ben Smith. He's the New York Times media columnist and joins us now. One of the myths that's being propagated, Ben, is that this count went on in secret, that the Republicans weren't allowed in to see the votes being counted. So here's Fox anchor and senior correspondent Eric Shawn talking to Dana Perino. Let's just watch this and then we'll pick it up.
The Trump campaign has said that they wanted to have their poll watchers there, and that I guess they're being asked to provide evidence for something that they say they weren't able to even participate in or to be able to see. And so that's, I think, where they would say that needs to be rectified, if it could be.
That's not true. It's not true. It's just not true. The election poll watchers, they are called canvass watchers. Republicans have been in this room, in that room, where they're supposed to be, standing alongside with the Democrats.
So there are some standing tall, Ben, within Fox News. What do you think's going on inside the company at the moment?
Well, it's sort of an oddly run place with a lot of different parts that don't really talk to each other. But the core dynamic is that I think that Trump has such a powerful hold on their audience. And I think you see people like Carlson kind of wanting to keep faith with an audience that doesn't want to believe the results and that wants to listen to Trump, and choosing that over reality.
suppose we should ask where the Murdochs are on this, because I saw a Wall Street Journal editorial the other day, and in it they said Trump isn't obliged to concede or congratulate his opponent if he loses, though it would be better for the country and his own legacy if he did. So, I mean, that's diametrically opposed to where their television station is. Do they have any control over what's being shown on Fox News?
I mean, they seem to have very little control over the primetime hosts. I think Rupert Murdoch is in the Cotswolds, did not come to the U.S. for the event. He's, the only executive any of those folks really listen to, as far as I can tell. And yeah, the primetime hosts are perpetually flirting with the idea that they could move to some further right Trumpier network, which I think is a real threat to Fox. And it's a strange situation.
Can we talk, Ben, about what happens to cable television here in America? I mean, Trump television, and I don't mean that by Trump television, I mean Trump on television, has been kind of addictive for viewers, clearly, here in America. And I know that cable news networks have spent the last 2 years thinking, my goodness, what happens next? What can they do about their ratings once Trump leaves? Is it automatic? Do you think that the news ratings decline here?
Yeah, I think it's basically automatic. I mean, it's Trump. It's the sense of panic among people who dislike Trump. I think CNN found this amazing formula of just having its hosts sort of deliver these outraged monologues to its audience at great length about Trump. I think that it essentially propped up television ratings at a moment when U.S. broadcast cable are obviously in decline, and I think it allowed them to kind of put off that kind of reckoning that the entertainment industry has gone through around, hey, you know what, we're going to have to deliver this stuff in some digital form. And so I know at NBC, for instance, the biggest of the U.S. TV companies, in terms of how many news channels it operates, I think that their new chairman has been telling them that now's the time that we have to sort of take the internet seriously. I mean, it's 2020.
Yeah, it's time. Ben Smith, thank you very much for joining us.
All those stations, Kathy, all those programmes that are wondering what will happen when Donald Trump goes. I mean, programmes like ours. Anyway,
all those programmes.
This is having an effect.
Those ones that started out just covering the first 100 days.
Yeah,
you mean?
I mean, all those programmes. Look, this is having an effect though, because people watch this, they retweet it, they show it on social media. There's some really interesting figures, aren't there, from one of the polls that's come out today, Politico Morning Consult.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. And those numbers have shifted dramatically since just before the election. So the number of Republicans, 34%, who don't trust the US election system, I think that, just before the election, I think I'm right, Christian, it was something like 70%.
Yeah.
Said that they trusted. It's halved.
70% of Republicans now say they don't believe the 2020 election was free and fair, which was up from 35%. And they're split on whether the outcome will change. 38% of Republicans think the results will be overturned, while 45% say it's unlikely. We were saying to Ron the other night, though, this is the problem. Once the genie's out of the bottle and you question the election system, you don't easily put that back in the bottle.
Yeah, and I think that's some of what is being remarked on around the world as well, right? That we were being, a bit flip. Joe Biden was kind of laughing at Mike Pompeo, that there is something about the country questioning its democracy when it has prided itself. I remember President Bush's second inaugural address was all about spreading democracy around the world. And so when this country doesn't seem, Ron Bongean is saying, oh, well, it doesn't really matter, Republicans don't have to come on board. But it is unusual. It is not the norms and traditions of democracy as we know them in this country. And that has an impact when those start to go away. And you wonder then what happens next time around when there's another election. Do the Democrats decide they're not going to come on board? And the stage is sort of set, right? Stay with us on BBC News, still to come.
We are a red state, and we want to stay that way.
Joe Biden was able to flip Arizona, but we'll see how it embodies the chasm between red and blue America.
Students in Wales will not be taking GCSE, AS or A-level exams next summer. Instead, the Welsh Government has decided to base their grades on assessments, as Hal Griffith reports.
I've just taken a snippet out of an actual real GCSE question.
Studying past papers will soon be a thing of the past for these Year 11 pupils in Cardiff. Today they learnt their exams have been scrapped. Instead, they'll face a series of teacher-led classroom assessments in the spring. For Leah and Lord, there's obvious relief, but concern too.
I feel like it's beneficial to us. We haven't had the time to learn all the coursework, the content, it wouldn't be possible. The stress level is way better. I'm not stressed anymore, so I feel like it's beneficial.
Well, I want to be a doctor when I'm older. If they will see it differently when it comes to the qualifications to like take a specific course. So that's what I'm scared of most.
Exams are still going ahead in England and Northern Ireland, leading to concerns that Welsh results could be seen differently by employers and universities. The Education Minister believes they will be recognised.
We have consulted with the universities before making this decision.
What about employers?
And
will they
to find
recognise
out, yes, of course, because once they've been awarded, they are a qualification that is exactly the same, assessed differently, but a qualification that is of equal worth in years before and the years to come.
This decision is based on the disruption and lost learning for pupils, not just last year, but right now. At this school, this term, they've already had an entire year group have to self-isolate and stay at home for 2 weeks. But moving to a different system brings another challenge. With Scotland and now Wales opting out of exams, there's renewed pressure on Downing Street to scrap exams in England and keep the class of 2021 on the same page. Howard Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff.
Well, Donald Trump is inching closer to Joe Biden in the race for Arizona's 11 Electoral College votes, but he still falls short of pulling off a last-minute upset. The president-elect is still ahead there by just under 15,000 votes, with an estimated 98% of the total number of ballots counted.
Does it even matter, considering Mr. Biden is projected to have won the state and he's also winning in Pennsylvania? Well, the answer is yes, because the Grand Canyon state is symbolic of a wider America, a country split down the middle, down ideological lines. And for that reason, the new president will have to find a way of reconciling his predecessor's supporters when he takes office in January. And as Sophie Long reports, that won't be easy.
Nowhere is the enormity of Joe Biden's task more evident than in Arizona. Once solid Republican territory, it's now a political battleground. Some young Latinas who watched their elders hide in the darkness now have hope. Stephanie's parents are undocumented and unable to vote.
This election is very important because it's not just for me, but our voices are for our fellow people who can't speak. Like, my vote is my father's vote. My sister votes is my mom's vote.
Others who worked tirelessly for change feel pure joy.
We will not be purple anymore. We will definitely be a blue state. The sheer joy to know that we are now a force to be reckoned with. It doesn't matter how he leaves, he's leaving.
But while some rejoice, others rage.
We are a red state, and we want to stay that way.
Regardless of who's in charge, whether it's Biden, Trump, red, blue, doesn't matter. Our constitutional freedoms will not be infringed upon. No one's coming for our guns, whether they like it or not.
What this election showed that no one can dispute is that America is divided. And the greatest challenge facing its new president will be to narrow the deep, wide chasm threatening to cause conflict across this vast country.
When a single state is so diverse, you can experience 4 seasons in just one day. His success will be America's success. Sophie Long, BBC News, Arizona.
It is so beautiful in Arizona. You might have breathed a sigh of relief yesterday when Pfizer announced that early results from its coronavirus vaccine trial showed a 90% success rate. But it might surprise you to learn that the safety of that vaccine, administering it safely, will depend on an age-old commodity.
That's right. It's the icy blue blood of the horseshoe crab. And it turns out this substance, copper-rich, is sensitive to bacteria, not just live bacteria, but to bacterial toxins that persist even after sterilisation. And so it's used, and it's been used for many years, to test for contamination during the manufacture of vaccines, IV drips, anything that might go inside the human body. There are, these days, synthetic substitutes, but the biomedical industry, so dependent on this blood that the disappearance of the horseshoe crab Catty, would instantly cripple it. And guess what? There is a warning. Isn't there always a warning these days that these prehistoric creatures are now facing extinction within a decade unless we do more to protect them?
Yeah, do you know what? They're not even really crabs.
Are they not?
They are called horseshoe crabs, but they're actually closer to... I thought you'd come up with a whole load of fun facts.
Oh, I've had
I was
such
just
fun
waiting.
with this day. Do
I
you know
just
how
Googled
much?
them 2 seconds.
Do you know how
They're
much
not. They're closer to lobsters. They're not actually crabs. And you should never pick them up by their tail because it hurts them. They're very sensitive.
Don't play me out. 1 quart of horseshoe crab blood is reportedly worth $15,000.
Wow. That I did not know.